Welcome back to Tipping Point on One America News, weeknights at 10 p.m. Eastern. This segment's Tipping Point, minimum wage. You know my feelings on the Democratic debate, and if you missed them, check out our Facebook page at facebook.com/tippingpoint on OANN. I called out they're stupid, and I also live tweeted the whole thing because I couldn't believe what they want to do to our country. The first thing they were asked was what their top 3 priorities would be if they were president. All 3 of them, Hillary, Bernie, and Martin O'Malley, all said raising minimum wage. Let's take a look.
It is understanding that in the wealthiest country in the history of the world, we should have health care for every man, woman, and child as a right, that we should raise the minimum wage to at least $15 an hour.
I would work quickly to present to the Congress my plans for creating more good jobs in manufacturing, infrastructure, clean and renewable energy, raising the minimum wage, and guaranteeing, finally, equal pay for women's work.
Equal pay for equal work, making it easier rather than harder for people to join labor unions and bargain collectively for better wages, getting 11 million of our neighbors out of the underground shadow economy by passing comprehensive immigration reform, raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour, however we can, wherever we can.
You know what happens when you raise the minimum wage? People lose their jobs because companies don't want to pay them more, or they can't afford the same number of employees because they're forced to pay them more than they can afford. People don't realize that, though, and hundreds of fast food workers hit the Charleston streets during the Democratic debate, part of the Fight for 15 movement to rally for raising minimum wage to $15 an hour. Joining me now is accountant and tax expert Andrew Poulos. Andrew, great to see you again.
Good to see you, Liz.
Now, you've worked with lots of businesses, multinational corporations to small businesses. What do you think of the Fight for 15 to raise minimum wage?
Well, I think that it's very noble that people should make more money. I think there's a challenge, basically, of who's going to be able to afford, as a business owner out there, to pay more money and keep the same number of employees, as you just mentioned a few minutes ago. So I think the thought is good, but the reality is it's not going to work like our politicians think. What's going to probably end up happening is we're going to have more layoffs, and it's going to negatively impact the economy.
Now, in a political sense, don't Democrats understand that raising the minimum wage causes job losses, or do they just not care?
Look, we're in an election year. It's politics. They have to get votes. So if you promise things that you can't fulfill, or you have a negative impact later, what difference does it make at some point in time for the politicians? So I think they obviously are very wise and very intelligent folks, but I think really it's not the mission of essentially getting people to make more money. It's getting elected. Now, we're already seeing things, Liz. You're seeing Walmart that's laying off people, closing stores down. I mean, this is only the beginning. If we go from a, $7.25 minimum wage to $15 or whatever they want to take it to, businesses aren't going to be able to afford this.
Right, and like you said, at this point, what difference does it make? It's Hillary's mantra now. I'm sure she's operating by it. Now, in that debate, there was a lot of talk about expanding entitlements, from free education that was introduced by both Bernie and by Hillary, raising the minimum wage, all 3 of them. Bernie Sanders talked about expanding Social Security. And when he was asked, Bernie said that the rich and corporations would have to pay their quote-unquote fair share to foot the bill for these. But it's not really the companies who are hit the hardest when entitlements are expanded, Andrew. Who is it?
It's the average taxpayer that's being hit. The reality is they need to look. All politicians, left, right, it doesn't matter what side you're on. The reality is that our corporations and businesses are shipping jobs overseas. Why are they shipping jobs overseas if it's so good and our system's so good here, and they basically aren't getting killed with taxes and higher minimum wages that are being proposed? So that's the reality of it. If we had such a perfect system and everything worked so great, companies like Apple and other institutions wouldn't be shipping jobs overseas where they can pay less and manufacture for lower cost.
For us everyday Americans, where does this hit us? Does it hit us in taxes? Does it make jobs more scarce? Where does it affect us as we go about our normal lives?
Look, it's going to affect us multiple ways. Many people are going to lose their jobs because small business owners who really drive the economy are not going to be able to afford, say, 5 or 10 employees. They're going to have to scale down. And those left are going to have to pick up the slack and do more work so they can keep their job. Then taxes. Let's look at this, Liz. When you have a person that's making a minimum wage for a minimum wage job, that individual probably doesn't pay a whole lot, if any, taxes when they file their tax return. They just fall in a very low tax bracket. You take that same person now with a $15 an hour minimum wage, and they're going to be making over $31,000. Now they're going to end up having to pay taxes more than they've ever been accustomed to. So really, the net effect is that they're not going to have as much in their pocket as they think. You take that same scenario and make that into a household, a husband and wife who are currently working minimum wage, who now will each be making about $31,000 or $32,000. They're in an even higher tax bracket. That's an even bigger problem.
All right, let's talk about the demographics of who loses their jobs when this happens, because I think this is a little hypocritical of the Democrats to talk about being for the poor, being for the needy, wanting to stick up for the little man. But when minimum wage is implemented, the people who lose their jobs, Andrew, tell us who that is.
It's middle class and folks that are making a minimum wage. People that are now making a minimum wage, if we have a small business owner who has 10 people, and with the rise in cost, and you add in the payroll taxes that business is going to have to absorb, that business is now going to scale down from 10 to something less, maybe 5 employees or 7 or 3 or whatever the case is. So the same people who will benefit from it are probably the same people who are going to absorb the cost, and then our economy is going to take a hit because we're going to have higher unemployment.
All right, I want to change topics here for a moment and talk about a project of yours. Now, you recently started the Polos Children's Cancer Foundation. Tell me a little bit about that.
Absolutely, Liz. I'm excited to announce that we did recently launch that. We got a 501c3 approval from the IRS. Obviously, it's near and dear to my heart because cancer runs in my family. My father passed away when I was 11 from colon cancer. I've been operated on. So I've made it a mission the last year to work on launching Polos Children's Cancer Foundation, to where we raise money to help families who have children with cancer with financial needs. So if a family needs to fly from wherever they live to Children's Healthcare of Atlanta or St. Jude's or wherever, and they can't afford it, we will step in basically and assist them with flights and accommodations and those type of expenses, basically to be able to defray their cost.
And do people request that assistance from you, or do you find those specific stories?
Those people will obviously go to our website, which is helpachildwithcancer.org, and request assistance. And then we will also partner up with hospitals, children's hospitals across the country, and they will obviously be able to come to us and say this family or that family has financial needs, and we'll be able to step in and help them out.
And this is specifically for children with cancer, families who have children who've been diagnosed?
Correct. That is correct. Yeah. Well, as much as I'd love to help everyone in the world who have children that are ill, this organization, our foundation, is going to be focused on families who have children with cancer and are going through cancer treatments or subsequent to cancer treatments who need some financial assistance.
All right. Tell me about the inspiration for this. You mentioned something about your father having cancer when you were a child. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, my father obviously passed away at age 43, exactly my age right now, at 43, and he died of colon cancer. I was actually diagnosed at age 15, and at age 17 when I graduated from high school. I underwent surgery to remove my entire colon to make sure that I didn't die, or else I wouldn't be here alive today. Then one of my younger brothers, who sits on the board as a board of director, he's also, Dimitri's on the board, and he's been operated on. So it runs very deep in our family. It's obviously genetic, but that's part of the reason why I'm doing it, is not to also raise money and help families, but we also want to bring awareness that, early treatment or being able to get diagnosed early can save a life, whether it's a child that's 5 years old or 10 years old or an adult for that matter. So it's a project I've been working on for a while. Obviously, I now have the platform at this stage of my career to be able to create the foundation and help hopefully many families across the country.
Andrew, that's a wonderful cause. Thank you for sharing it with us. I wish you the best of luck with it, and thanks for being on the program today.